Millionaire Fernanda Costa, in a gesture of instinctive distrust, left the jewelry drawer open. What she saw in the security camera footage was shocking. Sao Paulo was buzzing with its usual energy when Fernanda's private jet landed in Guarulhos. At 45, Fernanda was the embodiment of success, a ruthless businesswoman and heiress to a real estate empire. But as she descended the airplane stairs, her face reflected a weariness and loneliness that contrasted with her impeccable designer outfit. In recent weeks, Fernanda had been in New York, closing a multi-million-dollar deal that would further consolidate her position in the international market. Back home, however, she felt strangely empty. Professional success did not fill the void in her personal life. Upon arriving at her luxurious mansion in Morumbi, Fernanda was greeted by Paloma, her faithful housekeeper of 20 years. The older woman greeted her with a warm smile, but Fernanda noticed something different in her gaze. "Welcome, Mrs. Fernanda," said Paloma, helping her with the luggage. "I hope you had a good trip." Fernanda nodded distractedly as she entered the house. "Thank you, Paloma. Everything went as planned." But noticing the tension on the employee's face, Fernanda asked, "Is everything okay?" Paloma hesitated before answering, "Ma'am, there's something I need to tell you." Taking a deep breath, the older woman said, "I've decided to retire." The news hit Fernanda like a bucket of cold water. Paloma was her rock, the only constant presence since she inherited the family business after her parents' death. The idea of losing her provoked a feeling of panic that she hadn't experienced in years. Retire? But why now? Fernanda tried to maintain her composure. Paloma explained in a soft voice, "It's been many years, ma'am. My daughter just had twins, and I want to be around to help her. Besides, my bones aren't what they used to be." Fernanda remained silent, processing the news. Part of her wanted to beg Paloma to stay, offer her a raise, anything. But another part, the part that built her empire with cold and calculated decisions, knew it was inevitable. "I understand," Fernanda finally said, her voice barely a whisper. "Of course, you deserve to rest and enjoy your family. When do you plan to leave?" "In 2 weeks, if you agree," Paloma replied. "I'd like to help find and train my replacement before I go." Fernanda nodded mechanically. "Yes, of course. Let's do that." That night, alone in her enormous bedroom, Fernanda allowed herself to cry for the first time in years. It wasn't just for Paloma, but for everything she represented. Her housekeeper's departure was a cruel reminder of how alone she really was. The next morning, Fernanda got up early, determined to face this new challenge, as she faced everything in her life, with efficiency and control. She called a trusted employment agency and asked them to send her candidates for Paloma's position. Over the next few days, Fernanda interviewed several women, but none seemed suitable. Some were too young and inexperienced, others too old for the physical work the mansion required. When she was about to give up, the last candidate arrived. Ana Beatriz, 25, whose presence immediately caught Fernanda's attention. Ana was small, shy-looking, with large brown eyes that seemed to absorb everything around her. Her resume was modest, but there was something in her way of speaking, in the intelligence that shone in her eyes, that intrigued Fernanda. "Why do you want this job?" asked Fernanda, studying the young woman intensely. Ana held her gaze. "I need the money, Mrs. Costa. I'm an orphan, and have had to fend for myself since I was very young. This job would be an opportunity for me to have stability." There was a vulnerability in Ana's voice that touched something inside Fernanda. She remembered her own loneliness, the emptiness she felt despite all her success. Before she could think twice, she said, "All right, Ana, the job is yours." The smile that lit up Ana's face was genuine and full of gratitude. "Thank you, Mrs. Costa. I won't disappoint you." As Ana left the office, Fernanda was thoughtful. There was something familiar about the young woman, although she couldn't pinpoint what. She shook her head, dismissing the idea as just her own emotions reflected in that girl who, like her, faced life alone. What Fernanda didn't know was that Ana's arrival would mark the beginning of a series of events that would shake the foundations of her carefully constructed world. The truth she was about to discover would change her life forever, and the path to that truth began now, with the hiring of a seemingly innocent young woman who held more secrets than Fernanda could imagine. The first weeks after Paloma's departure were a period of adjustment for Fernanda. Ana proved to be an efficient and discreet worker, quickly learning the routines of the house and her employer's preferences. However, Fernanda couldn't shake off a feeling of uneasiness that haunted her whenever she looked at the young woman. One afternoon, while reviewing some contracts in her office, Fernanda caught herself observing Ana through the half-open door. The young woman was cleaning the hallway with precise and careful movements, but there was something in her posture, in the way her eyes scanned the walls covered with family photographs, that aroused Fernanda's suspicion. "This is ridiculous," she told herself, looking away. "It's just a girl doing her job." But years of business had taught Fernanda to trust her instincts, and her instincts said something wasn't right. That night, after Ana had retired to her room in the service wing, Fernanda lay awake, tossing and turning in bed. The uneasiness had become a fixation. She needed to know if she could trust Ana. The next day, Fernanda put a plan into action. She called Ana to the office and gave her a list of tasks that would keep her busy in other parts of the house for most of the day. Then, with her heart racing, Fernanda opened the drawer where she kept her most valuable jewels and left it ajar, as if by carelessness. With a knot in her stomach, Fernanda headed to the security room, hidden behind a panel in her bedroom. There, surrounded by monitors showing images from every corner of the mansion, she prepared to observe. The hours passed slowly. Fernanda saw Ana come and go, performing her tasks with her usual efficiency. When the young woman finally entered the office to clean, Fernanda held her breath. Ana moved around the room normally at first, but then her gaze lingered on the half-open drawer. Fernanda leaned forward, her eyes fixed on the screen. To her surprise, Ana didn't even approach the jewels. Instead, the young woman seemed to hesitate for a moment before heading to the desk. With quick, nervous movements, Ana began to examine the papers on the desk. Fernanda felt her blood boil as she watched her employee rummage through her private documents. But what happened next left her breathless. Ana took out her cell phone and started taking pictures of some documents. Then, with a furtive look towards the door, she approached one of the bookshelves and picked up a framed photograph. It was an old image of Fernanda with her parents when she was a child. Ana studied it for a long moment before taking it out of the frame and putting it in her uniform pocket, along with some papers. Fernanda was paralyzed, unable to believe what she had just witnessed. Anger and a sense of betrayal mixed inside her, clouding her judgment. Without thinking twice, she rushed out of the security room and headed to the office. Ana was finishing cleaning when Fernanda burst into the room, her face red with fury. "Thief!" shouted Fernanda, making Ana jump in fright. I saw everything." Ana turned pale, her eyes widening with a mixture of fear and guilt. "Mrs. Costa, I can explain," Ana began, but Fernanda interrupted her. "I don't want to hear your lies. I hired you, gave you an opportunity, and this is how you repay me. Stealing my things, spying on my documents." Ana looked like she was about to faint. "Please, it's not what it looks like. Show me what you took," demanded Fernanda, extending her hand. With trembling hands, Ana took the photograph and papers out of her pocket. Fernanda snatched them, her eyes burning with indignation. "Why?" asked Fernanda, her voice broken with emotion. "Why would you do this?" It was then that Ana, with tears in her eyes, said the words that would change the course of their lives forever. "Because that woman in the photo is my mother, and you, Mrs. Costa, are my sister." The silence that followed this statement was deafening. Fernanda felt the world stop around her, Ana's words echoing in her ears like a distant echo. "What? What are you saying?" Fernanda managed to articulate, her voice barely a whisper. Ana, visibly trembling, took a crumpled photo from her pocket and held it out to Fernanda. "This is a photo of my mother, our mother, the same woman who's in that photo with you." Fernanda took the photograph with shaking hands. It was true. The woman in the image was unmistakably her mother, but younger than Fernanda remembered, holding a baby in her arms. A baby that wasn't her. This This can't be true, muttered Fernanda, feeling short of breath. My mother never... She didn't... I know it's hard to believe, said Anna, her voice broken, but it's the truth. Our mother gave me up for adoption when I was a baby. I never knew why until recently when I found a letter she left for me. Fernanda fell into a chair, her mind a whirlwind of emotions and questions. How was this possible? Why would her mother have hidden the existence of another daughter? And why had Anna decided to show up now, in this way? Why didn't you tell me from the beginning? Asked Fernanda, looking up at Anna. Why all this deception? Anna lowered her head, ashamed. I was afraid. I didn't know how you would react. And besides, she hesitated, as if unsure whether to continue. Besides what? Pressed Fernanda. Besides, there's something else you need to know, said Anna, looking directly into Fernanda's eyes. Something about your family, about the business, something that could change everything. Fernanda felt a chill run down her spine. What are you talking about? Anna took a deep breath before continuing. The documents I photographed. I think they show evidence of massive fraud within the family company, a fraud orchestrated by your sister, Gabriella. Fernanda's world, already reeling, seemed to collapse completely with those words. Gabriella, her older sister, with whom she had had a tense relationship for years, involved in fraud? It was too much to process. I need you to explain everything to me, said Fernanda, her voice regaining some of its usual strength. From the beginning, and this time, without lies. Anna nodded and began to relate her story. She spoke of how she had discovered her true origin, of her mother's letter that led her to seek out Fernanda. She explained how, while investigating the family, she had stumbled upon indications of suspicious activities within the company. I wasn't sure how to approach you, Anna concluded. I was afraid you wouldn't believe me, or worse, that you were involved in the fraud. So I decided to seek proof first. Fernanda listened to everything in silence, her mind trying to process the avalanche of information. Part of her wanted to deny everything, but another part, the one that always trusted her intuition, knew that Anna was telling the truth. Fernanda got up from the chair and began to pace the room, her mind working at full speed. Anna watched her in silence, expectant. I need to see these documents, Fernanda finally said, turning to Anna. Everything you found about this supposed fraud. Anna nodded and took out her cell phone. I have photos of everything here. I also kept copies in a safe place in case something happened. As Anna showed the images to Fernanda, the businesswoman felt her world crumbling even more. The documents seemed to show a complex network of fraudulent transactions, all somehow leading to Gabriella. This can't be true, muttered Fernanda, although deep down a part of her wasn't entirely surprised. Gabriella had always been ambitious, even ruthless in business. But this was another level. There's more, said Anna, her voice barely a whisper. I found indications that Mom, our mother, might have discovered something about this before she died. Fernanda turned abruptly to Anna. What do you mean? In the letter she left me, she mentioned that there were dark secrets in the family that needed to be revealed. She said she gave me up for adoption to protect me, but that someday I would have to seek the truth. Fernanda dropped back into the chair, stunned. All this time, my mother knew this was happening. I think so, Anna replied softly. And I think that's why Gabriella discredited her. Discredited? What are you talking about? Anna took a deep breath before continuing. I investigated a bit about our mother's last years of life. There were rumors that she was mentally unstable, that she had paranoid delusions. But now I wonder if those rumors weren't deliberately planted to silence her. Fernanda closed her eyes, remembering the difficult last years of her mother. How Gabriella had insisted that she needed to rest in a private clinic, away from the stress of the company. How the visits had become increasingly short and less frequent. My God, whispered Fernanda. How could I have been so blind? Anna cautiously approached and placed a hand on Fernanda's shoulder. It's not your fault. Gabriella seems to have been very careful in covering her tracks. Fernanda looked up at Anna, seeing for the first time the resemblance to her mother. The same compassionate eyes, the same determination in the line of her jaw. "Why did you decide to seek me out now?" asked Fernanda. Anna took a deep breath before answering. "Because I think Gabriela is about to make her final move. The document suggests that she's planning a series of transactions that would effectively empty the company's accounts and divert the funds to offshore accounts." Fernanda jumped to her feet. "We have to stop her." "So you believe me?" asked Anna, a mixture of relief and surprise in her voice. Fernanda looked at her intently. "I don't know if I can believe all this about you being my sister. I'll need proof of that. But as for Gabriela, I know she's capable of anything for power, and these documents," she gestured towards Anna's cell phone, "are too detailed to be a fabrication." Anna nodded, understanding. "I understand. I'm willing to take a DNA test if necessary." Fernanda began to pace again, her business strategist mind working at full speed. "We can't confront her directly. If she's really been planning this for years, she'll have contingencies prepared. We need more evidence, irrefutable evidence." "I have an idea," said Anna, her eyes shining with determination. "But it's risky, and I'll need your help." Fernanda stopped and looked at Anna, a spark of curiosity in her eyes. "I'm listening." Anna proceeded to explain her plan. It involved using her position as a domestic employee to access Gabriela's office in the family mansion, where they suspected she kept crucial documents. Meanwhile, Fernanda would have to distract Gabriela in a business meeting. "It's dangerous," warned Fernanda. "If you get caught—" "It's worth the risk," interrupted Anna. "For the truth, for justice, for our mother." Fernanda studied the young woman in front of her. Just hours ago, she considered her a simple employee, then a thief. Now she was contemplating forming an alliance with her against her own sister. "Life takes strange turns," she thought. "Agreed," Fernanda finally said. "Let's do this. But we're going to need help." "Who can we trust?" asked Anna. Fernanda thought for a moment before answering. "Someone. Someone who knew our mother better than anyone, and who never trusted Gabriela. I think it's time to pay a visit to my father." Anna's eyes widened. "Our father is alive?" Fernanda nodded slowly. "Yes, although it's been years since I've spoken to him. She convinced him to retire early, saying he needed to rest. He lives in a house in Campos de Jordão. I think it's time we had a long family talk." Anna swallowed hard, visibly nervous at the prospect of meeting her father. "Do you think he'll help us?" "If he's the man I remember, yes," replied Fernanda. "And if not, well, at least we'll have answers." The two women looked at each other, a silent understanding passing between them. In a matter of hours, their lives had changed irrevocably. Now, they were united in a mission that could destroy their family, or save it. "Get ready," said Fernanda, her voice laden with determination. "We leave for Campos do Jordão at dawn." As Anna nodded and withdrew to prepare, Fernanda was left alone in her office, looking at the old family photograph. Her eyes lingered on the image of her mother, and for the first time in years, she allowed herself to cry. For the secrets, for the lost time, and for the sister she never knew she had. The sun had barely risen on the horizon when Fernanda and Anna left the mansion. They had decided to travel in Fernanda's personal car, a discreet black sedan, to avoid drawing attention. The trip to Campos de Jordão would normally take about an hour and a half, but with morning traffic, they expected it to be longer. The silence in the car was palpable, charged with tension and unasked questions. Fernanda kept her eyes fixed on the road, her hands gripping the steering wheel tighter than necessary. Anna, in turn, looked out the window, observing how the urban landscape gradually gave way to more rural views. Finally, it was Anna who broke the silence. "What is he like? Our father, I mean." Fernanda took a moment to respond, as if unearthing old memories. "He was a complicated man, brilliant in business, but distant as a father, at least that's what I remember." "When was the last time you saw him?" Anna asked softly. Fernanda sighed. "Almost 10 years ago. After he retired, Gabriela practically isolated him from everyone. She said he needed peace and quiet, away from business." And you didn't try to contact him? The question made Fernanda visibly tense. I tried at first, but every time I tried to visit him, Gabriela had an excuse, that he was tired, that the doctors had recommended limiting visits. Eventually, I stopped trying. Anna nodded, processing the information. Do you think he knew about me? Fernanda shook her head. I don't know. My father and my mother, their relationship was complicated. There were secrets, silences. Now I wonder how much of that was related to you. Silence fell over them again, each lost in their own thoughts. The landscape outside the window became increasingly green as they approached Campos do Jordão. After almost 2 hours of travel, Fernanda finally turned onto a side street, moving away from the main road. She drove down a tree-lined path until they reached a large wrought iron gate. This is it, said Fernanda, stopping the car in front of the entrance. Anna looked at the imposing gate and the high wall surrounding the property. It looks like a fortress. In a way it is, replied Fernanda, as she pressed the intercom button. There was a moment of static before a voice answered, Yes? Fernanda took a deep breath before speaking. Dad, it's me. Fernanda, I need to talk to you. There was a long silence, so prolonged that for a moment Fernanda feared her father would refuse to see her. But then, with an electric buzz, the gate began to slowly open. Fernanda drove the car along a gravel path until they reached a large colonial-style house. At the entrance, standing and leaning on a cane, was Antonio Costa. At 70, Antonio was still an imposing figure, tall and broad-shouldered, with completely white hair and a well-trimmed beard. His eyes, the same dark shade as Fernanda's, observed the car with a mixture of surprise and caution. Fernanda turned off the engine and turned to Anna. Are you ready? Anna nodded, although her paleness betrayed her nervousness. As ready as I can be. Both got out of the car and approached Antonio. Fernanda noticed how her father's eyes moved from her to Anna, a spark of recognition and shock crossing his face. Fernanda, said Antonio, his voice deep and controlled. It's been a long time. Too long, Dad, replied Fernanda. Then, taking a breath, she added, There's someone I want you to meet. Antonio was already staring fixedly at Anna, a mixture of indecipherable emotions on his face. I think I know who she is, he said in a low voice. Anna stepped forward, trembling slightly. Mr. Costa, my name is Anna Beatrice, and I think I'm your daughter. Antonio closed his eyes for a moment, as if struggling with an internal pain. When he opened them again, they were bright with unshed tears. I know, he said simply. I knew from the moment I saw you. You have your mother's eyes. Fernanda felt the world stagger beneath her feet. You knew all this time? Antonio nodded slowly. It's a long story, one that should have been told long ago. He gestured towards the house. Come in. I think we have a lot to talk about. As they followed Antonio into the house, Fernanda and Anna exchanged a look. Both knew they were about to discover truths that could change their lives forever. The search for answers had begun, and there was no turning back. The interior of Antonio's house was a reflection of its owner, elegant but austere, with dark wood furniture and walls covered with books. He led them to a spacious office where he indicated that they should sit in a pair of leather armchairs while he settled behind an imposing desk. For a moment, no one spoke. The ticking of an old wall clock seemed to resonate in the tense silence of the room. Finally, Antonio broke the silence. I suppose you have many questions, he said, his voice tired but firm. Fernanda, who had been containing her frustration since they entered the house, was the first to speak. Why, Dad? Why did you never tell me I had a sister? Antonio sighed deeply. It's a complicated story, Fernanda. One that involves love, betrayal, and worst of all, cowardice. My cowardice. Anna, who had remained silent until then, leaned forward. Please, Mr. Costa, we need to know the truth. Antonio nodded slowly. It all started more than 25 years ago. Your mother, Fernanda, and I were going through a difficult time in our marriage. We argued constantly, mainly because of my obsessive dedication to work. He paused, as if gathering strength to continue. During that time, I made the biggest mistake of my life. I had an affair with one of the company's employees. The affair lasted only a few months. When I realized what was at stake, what I could lose, I decided to end it. But it was too late. She was already pregnant. Fernanda felt short of breath. Anna, in turn, listened with wide eyes, absorbing every word. "What happened then?" Anna asked softly. Antonio closed his eyes for a moment before continuing. "I panicked. I offered money for her to disappear, to go away and never come back. But she refused, said she wanted the baby to know its father." "And Mom?" interrupted Fernanda. "When did she find out?" "Your mother, Isabel, was an extraordinary woman," said Antonio, a mixture of love and guilt in his voice. "Somehow she discovered everything. Instead of leaving me as I deserved, she decided she wanted to meet the woman. And the baby." Anna leaned forward, anxious. "My adoptive mother." Antonio shook his head. "No, Anna. Your biological mother. Isabel insisted that we should take care of the baby, of you. She said it was the right thing to do, that we couldn't abandon you." Tears began to run down Anna's cheeks. Fernanda, in turn, felt a mixture of astonishment and confusion. "But then, why was I adopted?" asked Anna. Antonio slowly got up and walked to the window, looking out at the garden. "Because I was a coward. I feared the scandal, what it could do to the company's reputation, to our social position. I convinced Isabel that it was best to give the baby up for adoption." He turned to them, his face marked by regret. "It was the biggest mistake of my life. Isabel never really forgave me, and I've lived with that guilt ever since." Fernanda suddenly stood up, anger flashing in her eyes. How could you do this to us?" "I have no excuses, Fernanda," Antonio replied, his voice broken. "I can only say I'm sorry, that I deeply regret it." Anna, who had remained silent, processing all this information, finally spoke. "But there's something I don't understand. The letter my mother left me spoke of dark secrets in the family, of dangers. What did she mean by that?" Antonio frowned, confused. "What letter?" Fernanda intervened, quickly explaining about the letter Anna had found and the documents that suggested fraud within the company, orchestrated by Gabriela. Antonio's face visibly paled. "Oh my God," he muttered. "So Isabel knew. She always suspected something wasn't right, but I never believed her." "What are you talking about, Dad?" asked Fernanda, feeling they were on the verge of another shocking revelation. Antonio dropped heavily into his chair. "Years ago, shortly before I retired, Isabel came to me with suspicions about Gabriela. She said she had found discrepancies in the company's accounts, transactions that didn't make sense. But Gabriela had always been so brilliant in business, dedicated. I didn't want to believe it." "What did you do?" asked Anna, although from her tone she seemed to fear the answer. "I made another terrible mistake," admitted Antonio. "I told Gabriela about Isabel's suspicions. She was furious. She said your mother was losing her mind, that she was paranoid. And God forgive me, I believed her." Fernanda felt the room spinning. "So, when Gabriela insisted that Mom needed to rest in that clinic?" Antonio nodded, tears now flowing freely down his face. "It was a way to silence her, to keep her away from the truth. And I allowed it, because it was easier to believe that my wife was confused than to accept that my daughter could be a criminal." The silence that followed was deafening. Fernanda felt as if the ground had opened up beneath her feet. Anna, in turn, struggled to process this new information, which changed everything she thought she knew about her family. "And now?" Anna finally asked. "What do we do with all this information?" Antonio straightened up in his chair, a spark of determination shining in his tired eyes. "Now, we do what I should have done years ago. We face the truth no matter how painful it may be. And we do what's right. Fernanda looked at her father, then at Anna, and finally nodded. You're right. It's time to unmask Gabriela and end all of this. It won't be easy, warned Antonio. Gabriela is cunning and has years of advantage, but together maybe we have a chance. The three looked at each other, united for the first time by a common purpose. The truth had come to light, painful and raw, but with it came the opportunity for redemption and justice. Where do we start? Asked Anna, her voice full of determination. Fernanda stood up, her strategist mind already working on a plan. First, we need to gather all the evidence we can. Dad, we'll need your help to access the company's old records. Antonio nodded. I'll do whatever is necessary. And then, continued Fernanda, we'll confront Gabriela, but we have to be careful. If she's really been planning this for years, she won't surrender without a fight. Anna stood up next to Fernanda. I'm ready for whatever it takes. Antonio looked at both of them, a mixture of pride and regret in his eyes. My daughters, he said softly, I'm so sorry for the time we've lost, the mistakes I've made, but I promise I'll do everything in my power to make things right. Fernanda and Anna exchanged a look. The path ahead would be difficult, full of dangers and complicated emotions, but for the first time in a long time, neither of them felt alone. As the sun began to set over Campos de Jordão, the three Costas prepared for the battle ahead. A battle for truth, for justice, and perhaps for the redemption of a family fractured by secrets and lies. The following days were a whirlwind of frantic activity. Fernanda, Anna, and Antonio worked tirelessly, gathering evidence, analyzing documents, and devising a strategy. Antonio's mansion in Campos de Jordão became their headquarters, away from the watchful eyes of Gabriela and her possible accomplices. Fernanda had taken the precaution of informing her personal assistant that she would be out of town on business to avoid raising suspicions. Anna, in turn, had resigned from her job as a housekeeper, citing a family emergency. As they delved deeper into the company's financial records, the extent of Gabriela's fraud became increasingly clear and alarming. Millions of reais had been diverted through a complex network of shell companies and offshore accounts. I can't believe I didn't notice before, muttered Fernanda one night, rubbing her tired eyes while reviewing another financial report. Antonio, who was sitting across from her, sighed heavily. Gabriela was always brilliant with numbers. I suppose she used that talent for evil. Anna, who was working on another computer nearby, approached them. I've been tracking some of these suspicious transactions. I think I found a pattern. Fernanda and Antonio leaned in to look at the screen Anna was showing them. On it, they could see a complex diagram showing the flow of money through various companies. Look, Anna pointed out. All these actions converge here, in this account in the Cayman Islands. And guess who the ultimate beneficiary is? Gabriela, Fernanda growled, feeling a mixture of anger and sadness. Antonio took off his glasses and rubbed his nose. Tired. My God, how could she have gone so far? The question now is, how do we stop her? Said Anna. Fernanda stood up and began pacing the room, her mind working at full speed. We need to confront her, but in a way that she can't escape or deny everything. We need to catch her red-handed. And how do you suggest we do that? Asked Antonio. Fernanda stopped, an idea forming in her mind. Next week is the annual board meeting. All the major shareholders will be there. It's the perfect moment. Anna frowned. Isn't it too risky? If Gabriela suspects something? It's a risk we have to take, replied Fernanda. If we wait any longer, it might be too late. Antonio nodded slowly. Fernanda is right. Besides, with all the shareholders present, Gabriela won't be able to deny the accusation so easily. Well, said Anna, what's the plan? Fernanda explained that she intended to present the evidence during the meeting, while Anna would work behind the scenes to ensure that all the evidence was ready and accessible. Antonio, in turn, would use his influence to ensure that all key board members were present. On the night before the meeting, Fernanda found herself unable to sleep. She went out to the garden of her father's house, seeking some fresh air to calm her nerves. To her surprise, she found Anna already there, sitting on a bench, looking at the stars. You can't sleep either? Asked Fernanda, sitting down next to her. Anna shook her head. Too many thoughts spinning in my head. Fernanda nodded, understanding perfectly. Anna, I want you to know that whatever happens tomorrow, I'm grateful to have met you, to have discovered the truth. Anna looked at her eyes shining with contained emotion. Me too, Fernanda. All my life, I dreamed of having a family. I never imagined I would find it this way. The two sisters sat in silence for a moment, contemplating the stars and the path that had led them here. Do you think our mother would be proud? Asked Anna in a low voice. Fernanda felt a lump in her throat. I'm sure she would be. We're doing what she always wanted, uncovering the truth and doing what's right. They held hands, finding strength and comfort in this simple gesture. Tomorrow they would face Gabriela and fight for the future of their family and their company. The next day, the sun had barely risen when Fernanda, Anna, and Antonio arrived at the Costa Company headquarters. The building was already buzzing with activity, with shareholders, executives, and board members entering and leaving the main conference room. Gabriela, at the center of it all, greeted guests with her usual charm and confidence. But when she saw Fernanda enter with Antonio and Anna, a brief expression of surprise crossed her face, quickly replaced by a rehearsed smile. Fernanda, Dad. What a surprise to see you together, said Gabriela, approaching them. Her eyes landed on Anna with curiosity. And who is this young woman? Fernanda maintained her composure, although her heart was racing. I'll explain everything during the meeting, Gabriela. I think we all have a lot to talk about. Gabriela narrowed her eyes but kept smiling. Of course, we'd better go in. The meeting is about to start. When everyone was settled, the meeting began with the usual reports. But Fernanda could barely concentrate, knowing that the decisive moment was approaching. Finally, the time came. Fernanda stood up, feeling all eyes on her. Ladies and gentlemen of the board, she began, her voice firm despite her nerves. I have information that will change everything you believe you know about the current state of the company. Gabriela, seated at the table, frowned. Fernanda, what are you talking about? Ignoring the interruption, Fernanda continued. In recent years, our company has been the victim of massive fraud. Millions of reais have been diverted to personal accounts through a network of shell companies. The room exploded in murmurs of shock and indignation. Gabriela stood up abruptly. This is ridiculous. Do you have proof of these absurd accusations? Actually, I do, replied Fernanda, signaling to Anna, who began distributing folders with the collected evidence. What followed was a detailed presentation of all the evidence, exposing each suspicious transaction, each hidden account, each manipulation of the accounting books. As Fernanda spoke, she could see Gabriela's face growing increasingly pale. At the end, Fernanda turned to her sister. And the person responsible for all of this is you, Gabriela. Chaos took over the room. Shareholders began shouting questions, demanding explanations. Gabriela, for the first time in her life, seemed at a loss for words. Before Gabriela could respond, Antonio stood up and, with a voice heavy with sadness, said, Gabriela, the truth has come to light, and it's time to face it. Gabriela looked at her father, betrayed and confused. Dad, you too? Yes, Antonio replied firmly. I helped uncover the truth, and now we need to fix what's wrong. Gabriela seemed on the verge of despair, but then, as if something snapped inside her, her expression hardened. I always had a backup plan, she said, pressing a button on her cell phone. Immediately, the lights flickered, and the computer systems began to fail. But Gabriela's planned escape was quickly contained. Thanks to Fernanda's quick actions and her team, Gabriela's private plane was intercepted before takeoff. As she was escorted off the aircraft, defeated, Gabriela looked at her sister and father with bitterness. You won, she said, but Fernanda, feeling a mixture of sadness and relief, replied, This isn't about winning, Gabriela. It's about doing what's right. Gabriela was taken away by the authorities, and as she watched her sister being led away, Fernanda realized that the real battle was just beginning, that of restoring the integrity of the Costa family and the company that bore their name. In the months that followed, Fernanda, Ana, and Antonio worked tirelessly to rebuild what had been destroyed. They not only restored investor confidence, but also began to rebuild their family ties, now strengthened by truth and determination to move forward. At a family dinner, a year after the events that changed their lives, Fernanda raised her glass and said, "To family, to truth, and to second chances." And so, under the stars of Campos de Jordão, Fernanda and Ana allowed themselves to feel a peace they hadn't experienced in a long time. The path ahead would still be difficult, but now, for the first time, they knew they would face everything together, united by a bond that neither time nor secrets could break.